What if I told you that you don't need a huge following or even a massive list to land paid sponsorships? In today's episode of the Crush the Rush podcast, I'm sitting down with Justin Moore, who is the creator of Creator Wizard and the author of Sponsorship Magnet, to talk about all things brand deals, sponsorship strategy, and how you, yes, even you with a small but mighty audience, can become a sponsor magnet. So Justin has helped thousands of creators and entrepreneurs land brand partnerships by teaching them how to pitch themselves with confidence and clarity and connection. And so whether you're a content creator, a course creator, or a coach looking to add another income stream, this conversation is packed with actionable advice, as in we actually open up a real life example to help you start or level up your sponsor game. So inside, we're going to talk about the biggest myths holding you back from pitching other brands, what brands are really looking at right now, how to craft a compelling pitch without sounding salesy, and the secret to becoming a sponsor magnet, no matter your following or your size. Let's dive in. Hello, Justin. Welcome to the Crush the Rush podcast. I have been geeking out over this interview for so long because you are new to my world. We were introduced through a friend. And I think the way that you talk about sponsorships and the way that you talk about scaling is just so different than what we have seen in the industry. So welcome to the show.
I'm super excited to be here. Let's dig into it. I know we've probably got a lot of sponsorship skeptics listening. They saw this title and they're like, I don't have a large enough audience for this, or I don't know if I really want to do that. So I'm excited to change some minds today.
Yeah, I love that. So I do want to dig right in because before we hit record, we were chatting about okay, what would be, what do our listeners really want to hear? And we could ask you a million things. You have such an amazing background. But I think the number one question that I had when I started learning about your method and your book, The Sponsor Magnet, was, well, sponsorships are only for really large audiences, right? I'm a huge royal family fan, and a new podcast came out from Meghan Markle. And I'm like, of course she hit number one in the first 30 seconds because she already has a large audience and she's a huge influencer. So can we just bust that myth right away?
So the majority of my clients actually don't have very large audiences. In fact, the people that I work with oftentimes who have the most robust sponsorship businesses are the people who have a very, very specific niche where there are brands and companies who find it very hard to spend their advertising dollars in such a concentrated niche. So let me share a quick example. So one of my clients, her name is Dr. Alex, and she has a podcast called Digital Pathology Place. So she's a veterinarian physician, and she's getting hundreds or thousands of views or downloads on her podcast, on her YouTube videos, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. And she has these, who is in her audience, right? It's the lab techs, it's the doctors, it's the medical device, representatives at these companies nerding out over this topic around digital pathology. And so you look at the medical device companies, the biopharmaceutical companies out there who have $20 million to spend on marketing this year. And they're thinking, how do we spend this money? Well, we could advertise in the Prehistoric Trade magazine that sits on the doctor's office that no one reads. We could try to maybe run Google pay-per-click ads. It's highly regulated, remember, so they have to figure out exactly, the kosher ways to actually market. And so here we go. Oh, there's this person named Dr. Alex who has this audience of exactly the type of people that we're trying to reach. Let's go roll out the red carpet to her. And so she's absolutely crushing it with brand partnerships, and she doesn't have a gigantic audience. And so that story plays out over and over and over in terms of the people that I work with. And so I think that the first mindset shift, here is realizing that it's not necessarily about the size of your audience. It's about the composition of your audience.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And we talk a lot about it's not the number, it's the engagement. And it's I would rather have 100 people that are really excited than a million people who are doing nothing. You gave an example of a sponsorship or a partnership. If you're new to this world and you're okay, well, what the heck is he talking about? What does that look like? Well, what are some examples?
So I think what a brand deal or a sponsorship looks like to a lot of people is like, oh, I see my favorite Instagram influencer holding up a product, it says like paid partnership with brand on their feed or something, right? Or maybe they watch a YouTube video and they see kind of like an integration, like you're watching a 15-minute video and then like halfway through they start talking about a sponsor and then they proceed. And so I think that is what most people think of when it comes to like a brand deal, a partnership, a sponsorship, et cetera. But like the opportunities that I help people, ink and forge in my coaching program and in my course and things like that, very rarely conform to that type of brand deal. Some of the time they do that, but a lot of times it could be something like, hey, I'm going to go speak on behalf of the brand at a conference, or, oh, I'm going to do a webinar in partnership with the brand. And yeah, maybe I'm going to do some pre-rolls or mid-roll ads on my podcast as part of this. Maybe I'm going to do some newsletter blasts. Heck, I have a course, Holly, and you know what? My course is sponsored.
Yeah.
I have people come into my brands who are looking to get in front of, think about what my course student represents as a potential customer of that brand. This is someone who has taken out their credit card. They've paid multiple thousands of dollars to invest in their business. Don't you think the brand or the company wants to get in front of that audience? Wow, that's a really interesting type of sponsorship, right? And so I look at sponsorships very holistically to think, okay, let's have a conversation with the sponsor. Let's understand what are they trying to accomplish. And then I can recommend something bespoke to them that will help them move the needle on that. And it could be social media. It could be YouTube. It could be podcasts. It could be me flying out to Europe to speak at the conference. It could be lots of different things. And I'm going to propose something custom.
Yeah, I love the customized approach to this. I can't remember if it was in your book or a podcast that I was listening to, and you talked about conferences. And I think this is like a really easy one to wrap your head around. And we actually just did it. And it's like, if someone is paying a lot of money to come to a conference and your book is in the bag, right? Like, then you're getting all of these people paying attention to you. So we took that as an example and we launched a new private podcast, and we actually put sunglasses in everyone's bag that had like our podcast name on it. And I was like, this is such an easy way to, and it's very organic. It's very grassroots. And I think that's one of the things that we share here. And so I think those are just, if you're thinking, are you ready? This is just a great way to say like, yes, you are ready. But if you're still questioning it, how do you know if you're ready to put yourself in these positions?
So here's the deal. I think that a lot of people hesitate or wait to do sponsorships because they feel as though there is some sort of gatekeeper that's going to come to them and be like, okay, you're ready.
Yeah.
You are now eligible to do sponsorships, right? I think a lot of people, well, first of all, the first way in which a lot of people float into this, it's an inbound thing. They're not pitching a brand. They're actually, someone lands in their inbox. It's a brand, a company, a sponsor, and they're like, hey, we love your podcast. We love your social media. We love your whatever you're doing. Can we collaborate somehow? And so, maybe you get on the phone call with the brand. Maybe you don't even respond to the email because you're terrified. I've had a lot of clients tell me that. They're like, I don't want to screw it up, or I'm just delete it. I freak out. And so if you ever needed a sign of anyone to tell you that like you're ready, regardless of where you're at, regardless of how many followers, regardless of how many newsletter subs or whatever, like what I talk about in the book is that what you pitch to a brand or what you can offer to a brand will change based on where you're at in your creator journey. And so let's say, for example, that you're starting out, okay? Yeah, your podcast gets 100, downloads on average or YouTube views or whatever. Let's be real here. If you were to reach out to a brand yourself and be like, let me talk about it on you on my podcast, the brand's going to take one look at your podcast or your YouTube and be like, you know what? This is really not going to move the needle for us.
Yeah.
And you can't fault them for that. This is just reality, right? However, if you change your approach and you said, okay, let me do this differently. Let me go and do an audit of the brand's presence on the internet. Do they have a blog? Do they have their own podcast? Do they have social media accounts? You come to them and or maybe you look at their content and they are posting, but it sucks. Low quality, not posting super frequently enough, or whatever it is. You come to them and you say, look, I think you could be telling your brand story in a more compelling way. Let me actually make some content for you to repurpose. I'll send you 5-10 videos, photos on autopilot. I'll create a podcast for you. I'll be the host of it. I'll interview your team. I'll interview my friends, like get some conversation going around your brand. And so, what's beautiful about that pitch, Holly, is that How many followers you have is completely irrelevant. How many downloads and the amount that you can charge is completely detached from how large your audience is, right? And you can point to your own platform and say, hey, by the way, go look at my platform. That is my portfolio. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very, very different pitch when you're in the beginning. Okay, now let's say you've grown, okay? You're getting thousands of downloads or views or whatever it is. Yeah, maybe what you pitch is a combination. Maybe it's content for them to use. It's maybe some consulting that you do for them. And then, yeah, maybe posting on your platforms is going to be start to become meaningful for the brand. Okay, now we get to the very end of what I call the sponsorship continuum, this journey. And now you're crushing it, right? You're getting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, downloads, whatever. Yeah, the primary thing that you pitch them is, let me talk about you on my platform. And so I think if you kind of look at this continuum and kind of figure out where you're at, it'll give you a lot of confidence to decide, who you should pitch and when.
Yeah, I want to talk about pitching a little bit more because anytime, you own a business, you have to sell yourself at some point, right? So how are you recommending just getting into this space without feeling salesy and awkward and, oh my gosh, you get the email and you're like, I'm not going to respond.
Okay, so the biggest mistake that people make is that they make it all about themselves. They say, hi, my name is Holly. I've got this Crush the Rush podcast. We get this many downloads per, episode, and these are the demographics, and here's my media kit, and blah, 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 blah. It's just this narcissistic word vomit. Not that you do this. I'm just saying this is what most people do, right? It's like this very me focused thing, and the brand reads this email, and they say, I don't know who Holly is. There's lots of people on the internet who have lots of downloads on their podcast. Delete. Yeah. or at the end of your pitch, you're probably saying, would love to figure out a way to collaborate. And this brand's like, I don't have time for this. I don't know this person. I don't know how I could collaborate with them. I'm busy. Let me just not respond to this or delete it. And so a lot of people convince themselves that pitching doesn't work because they're sending these bad pitches. Not only is the content of the pitch sucks, but they're sending it to the wrong person. And so there's basically these two major buckets that you need to figure out, which is what do you say and who do you send it to? And so the major structural change that you need to make when you're crafting these pitches is make it all about them. And so I have this pitching methodology that I talk about in the book called the ROPE method, ROPE. So your pitch has to be relevant to something a campaign the brand is either currently running or has run in the past. O stands for organic, meaning that you can tie your pitch back to organic work that you've already published that illustrates that your audience has an affinity for their brand or their product. P stands for proof, so you can show how you've helped other brands achieve results. And E stands for easy to execute, when the brand says, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. What did you have in mind? And so the form that this takes, actually, you know what? It'd be fun. Tell me what you think of this. Okay. Should we do a real example? Should we be like, I want to pitch this brand, and I'll walk you through how I would approach putting this pitch together.
You want me to
what do you
think of a brand?
Yeah, think of a brand, and we'll YOLO it.
We were talking about private podcasts, which I love. And I actually have a really great relationship with Hello Audio. I've been on their podcast a few times and things like that. So I was like, oh, well, maybe they should sponsor one of my courses, or maybe they should sponsor our podcast. I've never done any of this before. So that was the idea that was going through my head while you were chatting.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here.
This is making me nervous.
We're YOLOing here, but this is what's gonna make it fun. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna share my screen here, and we're gonna walk through this. Okay. So, all right. Okay, so here we go. So what I did is, it's Hello Audio, right? .fm, this is it? Okay, so for those of you guys who are just listening, if you want to get the video experience, come to YouTube or Spotify or whatever. And so what I want to do is I want to look at this brand's website, and I want to see, okay, what does it seem like they care about right now? So the primary call to action that they have right now is a 7-day free trial. No credit card required. That's their primary CTA. Okay, I'm going to scroll down here. They've got Amy Porterfield on here. We turn your course into private podcasts that audiences love. Okay, so they talk about all the things that they do. The Creator's Cure. Okay, this is just a long sales page, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I'm going to go over I'm going to open up their Instagram. I'm going to open up their Facebook. One thing that is interesting to me here is I see that they have a knowledge base here. So I'm going to open that up. What is this? Okay, I got a pop-up here. Listen to launch your private podcast. Okay, so they have their own podcast, it seems like. That's interesting. Yep. Okay, so there's another interesting thing here. Okay, let's go over to their Instagram. So they've kind of got the grid here. Okay, so they're featuring a little testimonial from Amy here. So one of the things that I like to do is, first of all, I'm going to look at their Instagram story highlight shelf, because they're probably featuring things here that they want people to care about, right? This is like a, so that's one thing that we could look at in the media is interesting. So we're sitting here, time of recording, or when this episode comes out, it's June, right? Yeah. And so if we're sitting here in June and we're thinking, I would love to pitch Hello Audio for some sort of summer promotion or summer campaign, too late. That's too late, Holly, because you know what? They baked that campaign 3 months ago, probably, right? Any marketer worth their salt is going to be planning this stuff several months at least in advance. And so if we're going to be pitching them here in June, we need to be pitching, some sort of idea probably for the fall. Back to school, maybe fall, even holidays, maybe. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll back on their Instagram and I want to know, what were they posting last September? Were they running any sort of seasonal campaigns? Okay, so here we go. This is January. I'm scrolling. Okay, so this is interesting. So back in December, they did, something. Let's see here. I'm going to see if I could find something interesting. So one little interesting thing that I noticed here is that the only thing that they post on here is like clips from their podcast interviews. Yeah. Which is like arguably maybe not super effective. No shade to them, but like one observation, right? This is like one observation that like, maybe I might be able to help them like with their content strategy potentially. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I'm going to scroll. I'm keeping going. These are podcast episodes. What I'm looking for is like, is there some sort of like seasonal promotion that they ran back then? So, okay. So they value like collab posts. So this was like a collab with another creator here. This is interesting. Hello Audio. Okay. So here's kind of some UGC video back in August. So yeah. So like, I'm not seeing anything seasonal, which is like, an opportunity potentially to say like, hey, let's do something seasonal. Like we know that there are, in terms of launch, if people are doing live launches or they're trying to turn their evergreen course into something more engaging for a membership or something, maybe we do some sort of seasonal promotion. Okay, kids are back in school. I don't know. I'm making something up. Kids are back in school. Time to like, reinvigorate your course community. Why not do it with a private podcast feed? And we can run some sort of challenge or promotion or something like that in partnership with you. This is the pitch. And so let's go through the rope method, right? R is, hey, I was going through your feed, the relevancy, right? And I saw that the majority of what you're posting on social is this is great. I didn't see that you guys have run any sort of seasonal promotions, right? This is the relevancy because we clearly have researched it, right? The O is organic. So here's where you link up a past episode of your podcast, Holly, that talked about seasonal launches, the power of that. And if you don't have one, you make an episode in advance of pitching them. Yeah. It's still serving your listeners, right? But it also is going to serve a double purpose that that you're going to pitch this brand. So you have to be a bit more intentional about your content strategy if you haven't, if you don't have organic proof or organic content that illustrates that your audience might have an affinity to that. The P is proof. So if you haven't done a ton of partnerships, that's okay, right? If you say, I haven't done a lot of brand collaborations, what do I use as proof? You have a lot of proof. You want to know why? Because you have hundreds of course students. You have hundreds of people who have said, I trust Holly. And so you could say, hey, like when I tell my people to do a thing, they do a thing. When I tell them to sign up for my paid challenge that I just ran, what was it? $22, $27, something like that, right? When I tell them to do this, they joined, right? Here's some of the numbers there. And then the easy to execute is you're actually pitching them something specific. You're saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to craft the challenge for you. I'm going to create the lead magnet. I'm going to do, 5 podcast mid rolls or pre rolls. I'm going to do this. Are you free on Thursday at 10 a.m. to talk about this? Do you hear how much more potent of a pitch that is than, hey, I use Hello Audio. I love it. Everyone in my course loves it. Yeah. You see, it's so much more potent, right? Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to dig in your book a little bit more, the sponsor magnet, because I really do think it's like an amazing entry point. And I feel like it's opened my eyes to so many different opportunities. And you've talked a lot about how you've done this a lot behind the scenes. And this is so much more easily accessible to anyone. Like you can just go buy the book and you can start implementing it. So if you have the book, like what is your best recommendation for how you can actually become a sponsor magnet based on where you're at? So like if we have to start at the kind of the ground floor there in the first section of the book, what I talk about is mistakes that people make that basically kind of reduce their sponsor magnetism and make it hard for brands to really envision collaborating with them. And so probably the most important place that we need to start is designing what I call your STP, which is your surprising transformative promise. So basically, when anyone lands on your business, whether it's your blog, whether it's your social media, your podcast, whatever it is, they have a split-second decision. They're making a split-second judgment on who you are and whether that you can entertain them or educate them. Basically it. That's basically it, right? And so this assessment is different for every platform, whether it's social media, podcast, whatever. And so if you cannot illustrate to them very quickly that like you are someone that can help them in one of those two ways, they're going to leave. They're not going to follow you. They're not going to engage with your content. And the same holds true for a brand. When I ran an influencer marketing agency for about 7 years, and one of my tasks, so when we basically were hired by a brand or another media agency or something to run an influencer campaign, they would say, hey, go out there and find us 20 creators that would be a good fit for this. And so a lot of what we had to do was this kind of tire kicking exercise where we'd go out there, we'd look through people's profiles. My agency was focused around family friendly creators. And so we did a lot of campaigns, looking for moms who had kids between the ages of like 6 and 12 who lived in like the southeast of the United States. So it was like crazy specific. And so we'd have to go out there, find them. We had to make sure their content, like was within the realm of what the brand was looking for. And so oftentimes there'd be like discontinuity between how the person talked about themselves in their bio and the content that they were posting. And so the surprising transformative promise comes in, like we kind of workshop it. Like, if I look at someone's bio on social media and it said like, how many bios do you see where it's like, lifestyle, travel, parenthood, heart emoji, in the bio, no shade.
Don't say.
Yeah, no shade. But like that was what thousands and thousands of people say. Yeah. What is the unique way in which you're serving people? So the example I can give here is I talk about in the book this example with a fashion creator. Her name was Olivia, and her bio read something like the cutest everyday fashion petite styles. That was with a heart emoji. That was like kind of the bio. And so after we workshopped through the surprising transformative promise exercise, it became helping you find petite styles to look and feel your best. So if we kind of break this down, the helping you, that is the promise part of it, right? That you're actually going to do it for them. It's not about you. It's not like I'm a vanity thing here, right? The surprising is that it's focusing on petite styles, right? That's interesting. This is for me. And then the transformative part is critical. So you're actually to look and feel your best. You're actually going to help them accomplish something by following you. And so imagine if you're a petite clothing brand and you land on Olivia's page and you think, wow, she has whatever it is, 30,000 people in her audience who have this exact problem that our product solves. I want to work with this person. And so this is the very first place you need to start, which is that if you don't have this one-liner, if you don't have this elevator pitch, it's going to be really hard for brands to understand why they should hire you.
Yeah, such a good example. We love case studies, and I love that we just went through a real life one, which I don't know if we've ever done on the podcast before. So that's a first. But I would love for you to share like a sponsorship win. Like maybe an example of a sponsorship that was a little bit different or something that surprised you and then something that you learned from it as an example.
So the very first thing that came to mind is that I just launched my very first in-person event a couple weeks ago, and I got multiple sponsors for it. And so maybe I could share some anecdotes from that experience of like actually getting the event sponsored, because what was so fascinating about it is that every brand wanted something different out of being a part of the event. And so big shout out to Lulu, who's also my book publisher. They were a sponsor of the event. Level Up Creators was also a sponsor of the event. Paperform, which is like a Paperform and PaperSign, which is like a digital contracting tool, digital form builder tool. They also sponsored. And so, Paperform, I want to give them a shout out because they were the very first brand that signed on. And you know what they really cared about when I got on that discovery call with them? They basically said, you know what? We want more people to know that we are advocates for the creator space. They were not concerned really about how many people were going to sign up for a trial account of Paperform. They basically never said that. They just want to go. They want to network with people. They want to, they also were excited about the fact of getting content out of it that they could repurpose. So I said, we're going to have a photographer there. We're going to have a videographer there. And so as part of the deliverables, we generated these beautiful assets that they are now repurposing on their social handles or on their blog and their email newsletter, all this stuff. And so But then when I, got to, started negotiating and talking with Level Up Creators, which is kind of an accelerator consultancy for creators, they have something called the MRR Accelerator, which is launching in May. And they said, okay, we want leads for that. That's the goal. And so if we could talk with some people there who might be interested in this, it's kind of a high ticket thing. And so I knew that when I'm talking on stage or when I'm promoting it in the email newsletter about this, that's the thing I'm going to talk about. And so I think this was a huge win because number one, I would have lost a ton of money if I hadn't had sponsors for the event. Like for a while there, Holly, I thought I was going to take an absolute bath. It was like launching an event. We could probably do a whole episode just about that freaking event. But really, it was such a huge win for me because not only was I able to customize the deliverables that I offered to each sponsor based on their objective, but it also enabled me to, have this event, that a dream come true that I've always wanted to launch. And so I think the big lesson here is that the best way to get brands to open up their checkbooks, their wallets here is positioning a sponsorship of you as a way for them to achieve their objective. I think so many people focus on me. How can I've got this web series, I've got this podcast, I've got this YouTube channel, I'm getting all these views. How can I just find a sponsor to pay me money and insert their message? They don't have random piles of money laying around to pay you. Yeah. You know what they do have? They have big piles of money, but it's called budgets. Budgets for their own initiatives. So your job is to do research and try to learn what are they trying. They've got this $250K laying around to spread the word about this big AI feature that they launched. How do you get them to allocate $50K of that to move the needle on that objective?
Yeah, such a good example. I want to flip the conversation a little bit because we talked about this before we started recording. And I think one of the obvious benefits of having this sponsor model is the relationships that you're building with all of these companies and then the people that they bring in. And one of the things that we were chatting about is you were able to launch a high ticket mastermind from a Google Doc. And while I don't necessarily know that has to do with sponsorship, I do think it does because I think it does have to do with the relationships that you've been able to build through this model that we've been talking about. So can you share behind the scenes of what that looked like?
Yeah, so 100%. So basically, I've never launched a mastermind. So real quickly, it might be interesting to kind of share what my business structure is. So for the way in which I started was I taught a cohort-based course called Brand Deal Wizard 11 times. So I taught it over basically 4 years. I launched it every 3 months. And that was what everyone knows me for is this main course. And so about a year ago, I converted it into an on-demand program. So I'm no longer teaching that as a live cohort. And because of the fact that I decided that I wanted to shift my business model to coaching, because what I found was that a bunch of people were going through my program and then they were like, this is great. We learned a bunch. But then a month later, they would be like, I just got this email from this brand. Can you still help me? I don't know what to do. And so launched the coaching model, but you're going to love this. I did it in a fashion where it was completely centered around life design. I was like, I don't want to do group coaching, be stuck on a bazillion different Zoom calls. You know what I want to do? I want to create an asynchronous coaching program. So what I did is I basically said, hey, you can submit your questions at any time, any day of the week, time zone, whatever, but our coaches are going to get back to you the next Tuesday or Thursday. Those are our coaching days, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so we basically designed this whole model around the fact that no one has to get on calls. We're all busy here. And so it's called Wizards Guild. And so I'm basically designing my business around this thing. And so now the difference though, is that it's not me. I have other sponsorship coaches that I've trained now who facilitate that advice. And so when I decided to launch this mastermind, I had a pool of people who were like, you know what, Justin, the coaching program is great, but I want to talk to you. I want to be on a call directly with you. And so this is why I decided to launch the mastermind. It was okay, I'm going to work with a core group of, 10, 15 people. And so this is what I did is at the end of the event, at the end of the in-person event is when I announced it. And I had it linked straight. First of all, it's because I didn't have time to do a sales page. I'm just going to put a Google Doc together. Here's everything that you get. It's super high value. Here's the link to the checkout at the bottom. And I would just go in there and manually update how many spots were left. So it was super lo-fi, but it worked. Honestly, I think what it really convinced me was I've really overcomplicated launches in the past. And when I realized that okay, maybe now is the time. I've built up enough credibility over the years in my business that maybe it's not about the sales page looking pixel perfect. It's just about the fact that people know I'm going to help get them a result.
Yeah. And I would love to take that in terms of wrapping up. And that is, I think, and this happens in any business, that we probably overcomplicate. Are we ready for sponsorship? So any last pieces of advice around maybe trends that you're seeing or things that are happening in the sponsorship space as our listeners are getting excited about implementing this new model?
Okay. Because I know a lot of people listening here do sell things directly to their audience, whether it's coaching courses, memberships, whatever it is. What if I told you that forging a sponsorship or a partnership with a brand could get you more clients or more course enrollments? Because a lot of the partnerships that I'm forging these days are like that, where I'm going to say, hey, if you're going to be in front of my course students or whatever, I also want you to do an email blast to your 50,000 customer base about my book, about my course, about my membership, whatever it is. And so you can really start to see that, wow, this is maybe not just like a money grab or a way in which for me to line my pockets. This also might be a way for me to get more exposure to my offers, my business, et cetera. And so again, just start thinking a bit more creatively about what a sponsorship could mean for you and your business.
Yeah, I love that so much. Okay, before we wrap up, we want to get to know you a little bit more. So I'm super curious, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten recently?
Wow, the best piece of advice: stop freaking out during launches. My coach, 2 days after Cart open and it was like feeling slow, I was like, do you think I should like add this other thing into it? Or should I do this? And he was like, dude, calm down. It's only 2 days. It's only been 2 days. Just chill out. It's a long haul. So that was a great piece of advice.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, so aside from your book, what is a current book or podcast that you are listening to or reading?
Wow. Probably my favorite podcast is Creator Science. My good friend, Jay Klaus. He is a masterful interviewer, super thoughtful, one of my best friends. And I literally binge any episode he puts out immediately.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, and last but not least, because you sort of flipped your model in the last couple of years and it's a little more life focused, what do you like to do in your free time?
I just love spending time with my wife, April, and my 2 sons. We're really into scouting. So I'm an Eagle Scout. And so I'm excited to now share that journey with my sons. And yeah, and then play music. I was in metal band in high school. So
cool.
love playing music as well.
Amazing. I mean, there's so much goodness packed inside this episode. So Justin, tell everyone where they can find you, learn more, and all the awesome things you have going on.
Yeah, I mean, we really just kind of scratched the surface on, kind of my sponsorship methodology. And so the best way to do it would probably just be to go to sponsormagnet.com, which is where you can grab the book. And I must say, there's a lot of pretty sick bonuses that you get when you pick up the book. So yeah, sponsormagnet.com is the best place.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.